Chapter 1. The Island That Never Let Us Go. Chapter 1. Every legend begins with a question. For Atlantis, the question is simple. Could an entire advanced civilization really disappear beneath the sea? For over 2,000 years, philosophers, explorers, scientists, and dreamers have tried to answer it. The story begins in classical Greece around 360 BCE. The philosopher Plato writes two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, in which he describes a powerful island civilization called Atlantis. This island lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and, according to Plato, it vanished in a single terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods. Plato's Atlantis is not just a city. It is an empire. He describes a maritime superpower, rich in metals, forests, and fertile plains, ruled by 10 kings descended from Poseidon himself. Over time, this civilization grows arrogant and greedy, threatening the free peoples of the Mediterranean, until, in his narrative, the virtuous Athenians defeat Atlantis in war. Then nature, or perhaps the gods, finishes the story. The island sinks. The sea becomes impassable, and Atlantis is lost. For centuries, scholars treated Atlantis as a moral tale, a warning about hubris. But in the modern era of geology, archaeology, and satellite imagery, a new possibility began to tempt us. What if some part of Plato's story remembered a real catastrophe? An island shattered by a volcanic eruption, a coastline drowned, a city destroyed by a tsunami. This documentary will follow the entire arc of the Atlantis story, from Plato's original text, through scientific theories that link Atlantis to real events like the eruption of Santorini, to more speculative ideas that place Atlantis in the Sahara, the Atlantic, or beneath the North Sea. By the end, you'll be able to answer for yourself the real question behind the legend. Not where was Atlantis, but why do we need Atlantis so much? Chapter 2. Plato's Atlantis. What the text actually says. To understand Atlantis, we have to start with the only ancient source that truly matters, Plato. In Timaeus, Plato has an Egyptian priest tell the Athenian statesman Solon a very old story. Many thousands of years earlier, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, lay a large island, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. From there, the kings of Atlantis ruled a powerful naval empire that reached deep into the Mediterranean. Geography. Atlantis is said to have a central hill where Poseidon's sanctuary stands, surrounded by alternating rings of sea and land, concentric circles cut from the island itself. The outer plain is described as an enormous, perfectly flat rectangle, watered by canals and rivers. Wealth and resources. Atlantis is rich in metals, especially a mysterious substance called orichalcum, often interpreted as a kind of copper or copper alloy. The island also has abundant timber, elephants, and a mild climate that allows multiple harvests per year. Society and politics. The island is divided among 10 kings, all descendants of Poseidon, and a mortal woman named Cleito. They swear oaths at a central temple, ruling together under a set of shared laws, with one king recognized as supreme. Downfall. In the early days, Atlanteans are virtuous and self-controlled. Over time, their divine nature is diluted by human weakness. They become greedy, love power and luxury, and eventually launch a war to conquer the Mediterranean. At this point, Athens stands as a symbol of justice and defeats them. Then, in what sounds like a geologic catastrophe, earthquakes and floods strike, and the island disappears beneath the sea. Modern scholars emphasize that Plato is doing philosophy, not journalism. His story is structured as an allegory about the rise and fall of states, contrasting a just, modest Athens with a proud, imperial Atlantis. But the richness of his descriptions, the canals, the metals, the ringed city, the sudden flooding, has always made people wonder whether he drew on older memories of real disasters. Chapter 3. Myth, Allegory, or Lost History. So, was Atlantis meant as history or as metaphor? Most classicists argue that Plato created Atlantis as a fictional example to serve his philosophical goals. There is no independent mention of Atlantis in earlier Greek or Egyptian texts. The detailed speeches in Timaeus and Critias are typical of Plato's literary style, where characters deliver carefully constructed arguments that reflect his own ideas. However, even a fictional story can be inspired by real events. People in Plato's time knew about earthquakes and tsunamis. Parts of the Greek world had already been devastated by such disasters. Ancient Greek and Near Eastern cultures preserved older flood legends and tales of sunken lands. Egyptians and Greeks had long-distance trade contacts across the Mediterranean, bringing stories of foreign cities and islands. Many researchers suggest a middle path. Atlantis is timeless philosophy built on top of fragments of earlier memories, coastal cities damaged by earthquakes, islands shattered by eruptions, and lands lost to rising seas. In modern times, the Atlantis story has attracted two very different kinds of attention. 1. Scientific curiosity. Geologists, archaeologists, and oceanographers ask whether any known events could resemble the catastrophe Plato describes. They study volcanic eruptions, ancient tsunamis, and submerged landscapes. 2. Speculative imagination. Writers and pseudo-archaeologists place Atlantis almost everywhere: the Atlantic Ocean, the Caribbean, Antarctica, the Sahara, the North Sea. Many of these claims stretch or ignore evidence, but they show how strongly the story still grips us. In this documentary, we'll keep those two layers separate. When we talk about science, we'll rely on evidence, geology, archaeology, dates, and texts. When we talk about speculative theories, we'll label them clearly as possibilities, stories that may be entertaining or thought-provoking, but not supported by solid proof. Chapter 4. A World of Catastrophes, Eruptions, Earthquakes, and Floods. To see where a legend like Atlantis might come from, we have to picture the ancient Mediterranean and nearby seas as they truly were, geologically restless. This region lies on the boundary of several tectonic plates. For thousands of years, its people have lived with volcanoes, from Etna and Vesuvius in Italy to the volcanic islands of the Aegean Sea, earthquakes, capable of shaking entire cities, collapsing temples and harbors, tsunamis, huge waves triggered by undersea quakes or volcanic collapses, rushing along coasts and drowning low-lying settlements. One of the most dramatic events in this landscape was the Minoan eruption of Thera, Santorini, around the mid-2nd millennium BCE. This volcanic explosion blew apart most of the island of Thera, spread ash across the eastern Mediterranean, leaving a layer that archaeologists still use as a time marker. likely triggered powerful tsunamis that struck nearby islands and the coast of Crete. At the town of Akrotiri on Santorini, excavations have revealed a highly developed Bronze Age society. Multi-story houses, frescoes, paved streets, and advanced drainage systems. The city was buried under volcanic ash, preserving its buildings and artwork in extraordinary detail. Elsewhere, along coasts all around the Mediterranean and beyond, sea levels have slowly risen since the end of the last ice age. In some places, whole landscapes, river valleys, plains, even forests, now lie underwater. Sites like Doggerland in the North Sea show how large regions of habitable land were gradually inundated over thousands of years. When you live in such a world, stories of drowned lands and sunken cities are almost inevitable. A place like Atlantis, destroyed in a single day and night, fits the emotional memory of volcanic eruptions and tsunami disasters remarkably well, even if Plato arranged those memories to serve his own philosophical design. Chapter 5. Santorini and the Minoan Hypothesis. One of the most serious scientific theories about Atlantis is the Santorini-Minoan hypothesis. It proposes that Plato's story may preserve a distorted memory of the Minoan civilization and the catastrophic eruption of Thera. Here are the main connections. A powerful island civilization. On Crete and nearby islands, the Minoans built palaces, harbors, and advanced towns centuries before classical Greece. Akrotiri on Santorini shows a wealthy trading community with art, plumbing, and multi-story buildings, traits that echo Atlantis's sophistication. Location. Santorini is not beyond the Strait of Gibraltar, but within the Aegean. Some scholars think Plato or his sources might have shifted the geography for dramatic effect, moving a real catastrophe from the eastern Mediterranean to a mythical island beyond the Pillars of Heracles. Others argue that Atlantis is entirely symbolic, but that the description borrowed details from known islands and ports. Catastrophic destruction. The Minoan eruption was one of the largest in recorded human history, ejecting tens of cubic kilometers of rock and ash. It devastated Santorini and likely damaged Minoan ports and coastal towns on Crete with tsunamis. The event would have been remembered in stories for generations. Decline of a sea power. After the eruption, Minoan civilization entered a period of decline, eventually overshadowed by Mycenaean Greeks. Some see this as a real-world parallel to Plato's narrative of an island sea power that falls from greatness. However, there are also problems with matching Santorini to Atlantis. Plato dates Atlantis to about 9,000 years before Solon, far older than the Bronze Age Minoans. Many scholars think this number is symbolic or misinterpreted, but it remains a mismatch. The detailed geography Plato gives, huge plains, massive canals, and a ringed city on a vast island, does not look like Santorini's real topography, even before the eruption. No ancient inscriptions or local myths from the Aegean explicitly describe a lost island matching Plato's Atlantis. Most researchers today view the Santorini-Minoan connection as suggestive, but not conclusive. It is highly plausible that memories of Minoan seafaring and the eruption of Thera shaped later stories of proud islands destroyed by the sea. Whether that memory is directly behind Atlantis or part of a broader cultural background remains open. Chapter 6. Atlantis and the Atlantic. Islands, Ridges, and Deep-Sea Dreams. Because Plato placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Heracles, many have looked straight into the Atlantic Ocean itself. Over the last century, as oceanography advanced, Researchers mapped mid-ocean ridges, seamounts, and deep basins. Popular imagination seized on these features. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a chain of underwater mountains stretching from the Arctic to the South Atlantic. Some early 20th century writers speculated that this ridge could be the remains of a sunken continent. Modern plate tectonics shows it is a spreading ridge, where new ocean crust forms. It was never a single large landmass above sea level in the recent geological past. The Azores and Canary Islands, volcanic archipelagos rising steeply from the deep ocean. Some theories place Atlantis here, arguing that a larger ancestral island could have collapsed in a prehistoric eruption, leaving only today's small islands. While impressive volcanic events have indeed occurred in these regions, there is no clear archaeological evidence of a lost, advanced civilization predating known cultures. Submerged plains and seamounts. Sonar mapping has revealed many undersea plateaus and rises. A few researchers propose that smaller islands or coastal shelves might have been exposed during lower sea levels in the Ice Age, later to be drowned. That is certainly true in a general sense. Many coasts worldwide moved as ice melted, but there is still no specific site in the open Atlantic that matches Plato's detailed description and dates, supported by physical ruins. Scientific consensus is that no large, recently sunken continent exists in the Atlantic. The seafloor geology we see today forms over tens of millions of years, not in a sudden, day-long collapse. However, the ocean remains vast, and smaller, local catastrophes, like landslides or volcanic collapses, do occur. These could have inspired tales of islands that vanished from view or became uninhabitable. In short, the Atlantic offers romantic scenery for the Atlantis legend, but so far, no hard archaeological proof. Chapter 7. The Eye of the Sahara. Atlantis in the desert? One of the most striking modern theories places Atlantis not in the ocean, but in the Sahara Desert. In Mauritania lies the Richat structure, also called the Eye of the Sahara, a nearly circular geological formation about 40 kilometers across. From space, it looks like a set of concentric rings of rock and sediment rising and falling in regular patterns. Some Atlantis enthusiasts have noticed similarities between this structure and Plato's description of Atlantis's capital. Both appear as concentric rings, alternating circular bands of higher ground and lower depressions. The Richat structure lies not far from the Atlantic coast, roughly west of the Atlas Mountains, geographical names that echo Atlantis and Atlas in the ancient stories. Recent articles, videos, and blog posts argue that the Richat structure could have been a low-lying, water-filled ringed harbor in prehistoric times. Marine fossils and salt deposits around the Sahara region show that parts of North Africa once had large lakes or shallow seas. Erosion over millions of years sculpted the modern eye we see today. However, from a scientific standpoint, there are major objections. Geologists identify the Richat structure as an eroded geological dome, formed by uplift and long-term erosion, not a man-made or recent feature. It is far older than human civilization. Archaeological surveys have found no evidence of an advanced Bronze Age city in its central areas. No palaces, no harbors, no monumental architecture corresponding to Plato's elaborate descriptions. Plato's text clearly describes an island that sank in a catastrophic flood, not an inland basin in the middle of a continent. Because of these issues, mainstream researchers do not accept the Richat structure as Atlantis. Yet visually, it remains one of the most compelling Atlantis-like features on Earth, a reminder of how easily the shapes of our planet can feed human imagination. Chapter 8: Doggerland and the Real Sunken Worlds. Another place often compared to Atlantis lies not in the Sahara or the deep Atlantic, but under the North Sea, between Britain and mainland Europe. Today, this area is covered by cold gray water and crisscrossed by shipping routes and energy cables. But during the last ice age and for thousands of years afterward, a vast low-lying plain called Doggerland connected what is now the United Kingdom with the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. As ice sheets melted and sea levels rose, Doggerland's rivers, lakes, and grasslands slowly disappeared under the advancing sea. Archaeological finds recovered by fishing boats and dredgers, including bones, tools, and even traces of hunter-gatherer camps, show that people lived and hunted on this land. Modern research paints a powerful picture. A new lost country the size of many modern European nations. Gradual flooding over centuries, punctuated by catastrophic events, such as a massive submarine landslide off Norway, the Storegga Slide, that triggered tsunamis around 8,000 years ago. Human communities forced to move repeatedly as coasts retreated. Some writers have called Doggerland the Atlantis of the North Sea, and recent popular articles even suggest it might be the true Atlantis. Others point out important differences. Doggerland was a flat, marshy region, not a single island with ringed cities and empires. It disappeared long before classical Athens existed, making a direct connection to Plato's narrative unlikely. Still, Doggerland matters for our understanding of Atlantis because it shows that entire inhabited landscapes really have vanished under the sea. Not in a single night, perhaps, but in ways that must have felt terrifying and world-ending to the people who lived there. Its story reminds us that Atlantis-like events are not purely mythical. Sea level rise is a real, powerful force in human history. Chapter 9: Atlantis in Myth, Pseudoscience, and Pop Culture. If Atlantis is so uncertain, why has it become one of the most famous legends on Earth? Over the last 2 centuries, the story has been reused and reshaped many times. Esoteric and occult traditions in the 19th and early 20th centuries imagined Atlantis as the home of spiritually advanced beings or lost magical sciences. Some racist ideologies misused the Atlantis idea to claim a superior original race or lost Aryan homeland. Interpretations that have no basis in Plato's text and are rejected by modern scholarship. In the 20th century, fiction and film turned Atlantis into a setting for adventure. An underwater city, a site of alien technology, or a utopian kingdom hidden beneath the waves. At the same time, Atlantis has been a magnet for pseudoscience. Books and videos often present speculative ideas as established facts. Advanced lost technologies, global civilizations before known history, or giant crystal power plants. Extraordinary claims are made based on ambiguous photos, misunderstood sonar data, or vague similarities in myth and architecture across cultures. Serious researchers respond with 2 key points. 1. Lack of hard evidence. No confirmed archaeological site anywhere in the world matches Plato's description in time, scale, and detail. We have many impressive ancient cities, from the pyramids of Egypt to the ruins of the Maya, but none are submerged superpowers fitting Atlantis exactly. 2. Respect for real ancient cultures. When we attribute every remarkable ruin to Atlantis, we risk ignoring the real people, Minoans, Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Indus Valley inhabitants, and many others who actually built the monuments we can see and date. This doesn't mean we must stop imagining Atlantis. It means we should enjoy the legend with clear eyes, as a philosophical story about power, pride, and collapse, as a mirror for real disasters like volcanic eruptions and rising seas, as a creative playground for fiction, games, and film, clearly labeled as fantasy. Chapter 10. What Atlantis really means for us. 1. In the end, whether Atlantis was ever a real place may be less important than what the story reveals about us. 2. Plato's Atlantis is, above all, a warning. A society blessed with wealth, technology, and power loses its sense of limits. The Atlanteans gradually care more about luxury and conquest than about justice and balance. In the story, they fall not just because of earthquakes and floods, but because their character decays. Nature's disaster is the last chapter, not the first. When we look at real history, we see similar patterns. Civilizations rise, expand, and sometimes collapse when they exhaust their environment, become rigid, or lose the ability to adapt. Volcanic eruptions, droughts, earthquakes, and sea level changes have ended or transformed many societies long before ours. Today, we live in another age of rising seas and changing climate. Coastal cities face erosion, flooding, and storms. Entire island nations confront the long-term prospect of relocation. Our global systems are more complex and more fragile than anything Plato could imagine. In this light, Atlantis becomes a mirror. It reminds us that no civilization is guaranteed to last forever. It suggests that arrogance and denial are as dangerous as earthquakes. It asks us whether we are paying attention to the warnings written in geology, ice cores, and shorelines. Maybe there was once a real island somewhere, a trading hub in the Aegean or the Atlantic, that suffered a terrible catastrophe. Maybe that memory drifted and changed until Plato reshaped it into a philosophical drama. Maybe Atlantis, as described, never existed at all. But the power of the story survives because it combines three elements. 1. The awe of nature's force. 2. The tragedy of human pride. 3. The haunting fascination of things lost just beyond our reach. As your documentary fades out, you might leave viewers with a simple thought. The real Atlantis is not just a city under the sea. It is any society that believes it cannot fall. The question isn't whether Atlantis sank. The question is whether we are listening.